Hey guys, welcome back to the video on 7.7, Chapter 7, Lesson 7. It's May 4th, so if you're a Star Wars fan, you better know this is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Okay. For today, we're going to look at 2 problems from our reteach, which is all of them, 4 problems from the skills practice, and 3 problems, from homework. That's going to be 9 of the 19 problems in your worksheet packet that you should be able to look at. We're talking about finding perimeter and finding area of the similar figures. All that is more proportions. Notice how finding perimeter says find the ratio for the scale factor and use it to make a proportion to solve perimeter. Okay, that just means you're going to get a scale factor that looks something like that, and you're going to use it to solve a proportion. Okay, finding area means you find that ratio for the scale factor, and then you're going to have to square the numerator and denominator. So we get the a and the b, and then we have to square them both before we can set up our proportion. Okay, notice both of those talk about proportions. That's all we are doing. And so we look at these. These are very visual problems. Very important that you try to draw these as I do or as you're doing them on your own. Okay, where if we're looking at number 1 in the reteach, they say Pauline is making herself a frame, and we've got a smaller frame that has a 5 for a length here, and they tell us that the perimeter for that guy is 16. Then we're trying to get this larger frame that Pauline got, so that her length here, it says, is twice as long as this one. So 2 times bigger. So if 5 is twice as big, this has to be a 10. So since this one is an easy twice as much, we just can use the basic a over b, not having to square it or anything else. So if the perimeter was 16 here, guess what the perimeter of a twice as large figure is going to be? It's going to be 32 inches without doing a whole lot of figuring. Okay, that's perimeter. Perimeter is definitely going to be the easier of the 2 things that we're going to be finding. Okay, so let's look at what number 2 would look like. Number 2 is a little different. And instead of going from the smaller to the larger, we're going to end up going the opposite direction, where we're going to have a triangle where it says, Brienne, put a triangular-shaped piece on her quilt when one side is 6. Okay, and then another triangle where one side is 3. So they also tell us that on this triangle with the 6, okay, that the area is 36. So we've got to find out the area for this guy. Maybe we make it x. Okay, those are our 2 triangles. Those are the dimensions we are given. This one in particular goes from 6 to a 3. Okay, well, we kind of know that that can be reduced to, I can make this a 2 over a 1, right? Okay. The bigger, well, now we got to remember, and I almost forgot, now once we get our scale factor, we have to do what to it? We have to square it. Okay, which makes it so that 2 squared is 4, 1 squared is 1. Okay, so our scale factor that we're going to use, our a over b now, is this 4 over 1. Okay, and if I went from the bigger triangle to the smaller triangle, this would be the 4 and this would be the 1. My bigger area was 36. My smaller area is what I don't know. So this proportion set up, maybe you consider this upside down, I don't know. And then you simply cross multiply like we've been doing. 1 times 36 is 36. 4 times x is 4x. And when you solve for this guy, you divide both sides by 4, and x equals 9. Did that stay on the screen? Barely. And so that would be 9 for your area. Since it's an area, it would be inches squared. Okay, take a look at that. Make sure you know how I got from one step to the other before you move on, before you keep your video going. Okay, stop your video if need be. I'm going to start erasing so that we can go on to our skills practice problems. Okay? And I'm only doing one at a time to maybe quicken the steps in between of the erasing and everything. So hopefully this is better and this is easier for you to follow. Over to the skills practice. We're going to do number 1, the skills practice. We'll call it SP. Number 1, skills practice number 1. They give you a rectangle where we know that one of these smaller sides, the width of that rectangle is 4. And we're given a larger rectangle where the width of that guy is 7. Okay? We are told that this perimeter equals 24. So since we're using perimeter, that's awesome. Okay, we don't have to do anything about squaring anything. We don't know what this perimeter is. So let's call that perimeter X. Okay? So all we have to do is say, okay, I went from a 4 to a 7. So guess what? That's my scale factor, 4 to 7. I don't have to square that guy. I don't have to do anything to him. I could reduce it in some situations, but not on this guy. This one does not reduce. So right away we can say, well, 4 is to 7. As I went from smaller to larger, I would have to go from smaller to larger. This is the 24. Okay, this is where the X would have to be. And if I'm doing this and I cross multiply, I would do 4x equals what 24 times 7 is. And I'm using my calculator as we do this so that I'm continuously checking my work as we go. 4x equals 168. Okay, so I divide by 4. And I'm going to get x, am I still on the screen yet? X equals 168 divided by 4 equals 42. And those dimensions are in meters. Okay, perimeter is the nicer way out of the 2 ways we're doing today. That one we just found the scale factor and did our cross multiplication right away. That's the same thing that's going to be on number 3. When we get to 7 and 9 on this guy, we're going to have to go back to the difficulty of doing area. Erasing this guy. And like I said, we're going to do number 3 now. Skills practice number 3. We have 2 triangles. Smaller one first. Larger of the 2 second. They tell us that this one is 12 here and a perimeter of 30. They tell us that this one is 24 here and we don't know this perimeter. So maybe we call it X. This one may or may not be one that's easy for you to see. And I'm going to kind of pretend like you can see this. That 12 times 2 is 24, right? So I should be able to take this perimeter of 30 and just multiply it by 2 and get my new perimeter equals 60, and those dimensions are in inches. Okay, some of them are that straightforward. The story problems on skills practice are both area problems. Okay, they seem to want to make the harder skill and put them on the hardest problems on the page. So let's look at skills practice, jumping down to number 7, the first of the 3 story problems. It says a triangle has a side length 3 and it says its area is 22. Then there's a larger triangle, and I know that because the other side of this other triangle is now 6. Okay, and we don't know this area, right? So now remember, this is area. And when we have area, you have to keep remembering that we're going to have to square this stuff. Because this is an area of times 2. Isn't 3 times 2 6? Okay, but we can't use times 2. We have to use what's 2 squared. We'll put it off to the side. 2 squared is 4, right? So this would be an area where we go from 3 to the new one would be times 4, or in this case, if we have 22 before, we can multiply it by 4, and 22 times 4 gives you 88. Okay, and the only thing that's happening is you can usually see that 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so what you have to remember is instead of just doing the times 2 though, we have to do times 2 squared. So we have to do the 22 times 4 instead, and our new area is 88, and that's inches squared. Okay, that might take you a couple times listening to me say that to get that one, but all we did was take our scale factor and square it before we multiplied it by the other dimension. On number 9, this lake lot one, rectangular shaped lake lot, has an area of 4,800, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than the other rectangle because if you read through the information carefully, the second one is going to be the larger of the two. It has an area of 4,800. Okay, and it says the width is 60. And the other one has a width of 80. And so, here's the thing, we don't know this area. So let's make it an X. And we have to consider that since this is area, we're going to have to square some stuff, and that's what's kind of somewhat unfortunate. But just finding scale factors, you just look from one side to the other, and I can say 60/80ths is the scale factor. Well, we know that 60/80ths, or should know, I should say, is the same thing as 6/8. We also should know if I take another 2 out of there, that's the same thing as 3/4, right? Okay, now here comes the squared part. We have to take that and square it to now get our scale factor. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. So that is the scale factor we're going to have to use. As far as now, we say to set this up, that 9 is to 16, okay, smaller to larger, as 4,800 would be to what we don't know, the area of the new figure. Okay, definitely going to want your calculator for this one. Because we have to do cross multiplying, which is 9x. And cross multiplying here, okay, well, 4,800 times 16 is 76,800. Okay, to solve that guy, we would have to divide by 9 on both sides. Right? Well, that divided by 9 gives you a decimal that we can round off. We can round it to the nearest whole number, we'll say. And so that x, am I still on the screen? I'll keep this high, equals, when you do that, you should get 8,533, and that is in feet. But since it's area, it's feet squared. Okay, just a quick rundown of this guy. We had to find the scale factor is 3 to 4, because 60/80 reduces to 3/4. To do area, they make a square 3 to 4, so it's actually 9 to 16. I use the 9 to 16 is to the 48 to the larger figure, and when I cross multiply, I get 8,533. Roughly. That was a decimal, remember. Okay, last page, because that was number 9 on the skills practice. We're going to look at 3 problems from the homework practice, and then I'm going to make you have to try a lot of them on your own, and I'm going to put, of course, a homework assignment from these on Classroom. Make sure you are using everything to your advantage. Use these videos, use these sheets, and check them with the answer keys so that you can be successful on your homework that you turn into me. Don't turn in homework with them all wrong, and then it makes me know that you're not looking at them very carefully. So we have two triangles that they drew for us on number 1 of the homework practice. Okay, they give 20 for this length and 10 for this, which is nice because 10 is half of 20, right? Okay, so if this is 48 for the perimeter, if 10 is half of 20, this perimeter should be, what's half of 48? This one's going to be 24, and that dimension is in feet. Okay, 20 divided by 2 gives that. So 48 divided by 2 gives that. Because perimeter is directly proportional, we can do that on perimeter ones that quickly, that easily. We won't be able to do it that easily on an area because remember, I'm going to keep reiterating, you have to square it before you use it. Okay? On number, checking with number 2. Number 2 has a smaller rectangle to relate to a larger rectangle. It tells us that the first one has a width here of 2 and that the perimeter is 12. It has this guy is 3. We don't know this perimeter, so let's call this x. Okay, well, our scale factor is simply this guy to this guy, which isn't a direct multiple or divisor to get from one to the other, so I have to use that as my scale factor. It's perimeter, so I don't have to square it or anything. I can use that directly to say if 2 is the 3, then this 12 must be to what my new perimeter is. And now we can kind of see that with this proportion, I know, and maybe you see it too, that to get from a 2 to a 12, can't we just multiply by 6? And so shouldn't 3 times 6 also be the same thing? So that here for my x, 3 times 6 is 18, and that's in inches. Okay, that's the last of the perimeter problems that I'm going to do with you. I'm doing one more problem with you, and it's one of the harder ones where we have to square the terms and stuff. It's an area problem. So get this down, get to where you understand that before you make this video go any further. So, on the homework page, number 8, last guy. It's a very visual type problem, so we're going to draw pictures. It's a rectangular shaped flower garden. It has a length of 5 and an area of 15. So this rectangle has a length of 5 and an area of 15, and that's in square yards. Then we have another flower garden with a length of 7. So this is going to be a larger rectangle where this is 7, and we don't know this area. So we're going to call it X for now. Right? So 5 and 7 don't directly relate, so that's strictly just a 5 to 7 scale factor. But this is area, so we can't be done, remember. We have to take this and square it. So 5 squared is 25. 7 squared is 49. And that is the proportion that we'll have to use to find this guy. So we can now set up our proportion where we use 25 is to 49. 25 is smaller than 49, which must mean we're going from the smaller rectangle to the larger rectangle. So the smaller rectangle's area is 15. So our x is going to be the larger area, and we're going to cross multiply these. Okay, this isn't really going to be an equal sign, so we'll make it an arrow. When we cross multiply these, we get 25x, okay, which is going to be equal to 49 times 15, which I'm sure everybody knows what 49 times 15 off the top of their head is. So of course it's 735 like you were all about to say. Okay, for sake of not going off the screen, I'm going to take you guys and I'm going to tilt you up a little bit. And so now we're going to take this guy, this 25x equals 735. Before I tilted you guys, remember we're right here. We're going to divide both sides by 25. And when you do that, you get x equals, you take your handy dandy calculator, you have the 735, you divide it by 25, and you get 29.4 on your calculator, which we can just say is 29. We'll round it to an even number, even whole number that is, and that'll be yards squared. Okay, so that's the last section of chapter 7. It's all about, the whole chapter is about setting up proportions in different ways. Okay, this is just one more way to look at some shapes and see if you can find out what their size would be. And you can apply them to real life situations if you kind of look at their story problems and see what they've said there. But that's it for chapter 7. My next video is going to be on chapter 8, and I fully believe that you'll like chapter 8 better than 7 because all we're doing is a bunch of plug and chug. You know what I say when I give you the words plug and chug? That just means we're going to take a bunch of numbers, plug it into some stuff, use our calculators to chug away, and we'll get our answers. So I'll see you then, and enjoy the rest of your day.